Welcome to our channel, all friends. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe my channel and press the bell icon to stay update for new videos. Thanks. Let's start new video. The door of the house was being knocked loudly and aggressively. I was alone at home, so I had to go to the door myself. At the same time, I was also angry at my husband, who, as usual, had gone out to wander with his friends late at night. I covered my head with a scarf, and as soon as I opened the door, I was startled to see my father-in-law standing there. His house was right next to ours, but he rarely came to our place. My husband didn't have a good relationship with his father. After our marriage, my husband had bought this separate house for me, and his father lived alone in the adjacent house. But what surprised me more than my father-in-law's sudden visit was the young and beautiful girl standing next to him. She seemed to be about my age. I kept staring at her, confused, when my father-in-law's stern voice snapped me out of it. "Shumila, move away from the door. Won't you give way?" I quickly stepped aside, and he took the girl by the hand and brought her inside, made her sit on the sofa, and then said, "Go, bring some water." I ran to the kitchen, quickly grabbed a glass of water, and handed it to the girl. She drank it in one go, as if she had been extremely thirsty. I didn't know whether I should ask my father-in-law who the girl was, or wait for him to explain himself. And why had he brought her to our house so late at night? It had only been 15 days since my marriage, and in all that time, I had never seen this girl before, nor heard anything about her. All I knew was that my husband and his father lived alone and didn't have many close relatives. After the wedding, I learned that they weren't even on the best of terms, which is why my husband had chosen to keep us in a separate house. My father-in-law had only visited us once, and now this was the second time. This time bringing along a girl who looked just like a bride. I say bride because her hands and feet were covered in mehndi. She was dressed in an elaborate bridal outfit with makeup on her face. Her hands were adorned with bangles and rings. Before I could ask anything, my father-in-law spoke. "I forgot my house keys inside, and I had no choice but to come here. This is my wife. I married her today. I couldn't just stand at the door with her, so I brought her here. Keep her company for a while. I'll go to my house through the rooftop and get the keys." After explaining, he climbed the stairs, and I stood there watching my 55-year-old, strong-built father-in-law walk away. I couldn't even muster the words to ask how he got married at this age, especially just 15 days after his son's wedding. Then I looked closely at the girl again. She sat with her head bowed, nervously twisting her fingers, with an expression of pure innocence on her face. She couldn't have been more than 18 years old, and that's exactly what shocked me the most. How could she have married my father-in-law? I wanted to ask her so many things, but I didn't have the courage. After all, it had only been 15 days since my own wedding, and considering the strained relationship between my husband and his father, I always felt nervous speaking to my father-in-law, afraid something might go wrong. My husband, Jamil, had a terribly short temper. Even more confusing was his overall behavior, something I still couldn't figure out, even after 15 days of marriage. He stayed distant and cold toward me. There was no real emotional or physical closeness between us. He spent most of his time outside the house, either alone or with friends. That's why I still hadn't been able to understand either my husband or my father-in-law. So I just sat silently, watching the girl, who was now technically my mother-in-law. Not long after, my father-in-law came back with the house keys, lifted the girl up, and took her with him. I remained seated on the sofa, stunned. Around 2 a.m., my husband returned home. Although I didn't want to start an argument, I couldn't stop myself from expressing my frustration. "Where did you go? It's 2 in the morning. Our marriage is still so new, and you hardly spend any time with me." Hearing that, Jamil lost his temper. "So the moment I walk into the house, your complaints begin? Is this why I got married, to be trapped in this kind of life?" His tone made it clear. He had no interest in me. It felt like I had been forced into his life against his will. His father had arranged the marriage and brought the proposal to my family. Everything happened so quickly, and I never understood why his father wanted this marriage so badly. But it was now very clear that, to Jamil, our marriage was nothing but a burden. Seeing Jamil that angry made my heart sink. I quickly changed the subject. "I only said that because your father came by earlier and you weren't home." Jamil jumped up, shocked. "My father? Why did he come here?" A frown formed on his forehead, and he stared at me with suspicion. Well, actually, your father, I stuttered, unsure of how to tell him. His anger deepened. Go on. Why was he here so late at night? Jamil, your father, he got married. He brought his wife here tonight. She's about my age. I'm still shocked myself. How could he marry someone so young at this stage in his life? I explained everything to Jamil, who then sat down on the sofa, buried his face in his hands, and said, Abba will never change. How many times have I told him not to keep getting married like this? But he just doesn't listen, Jamil muttered angrily, his voice clear in my ears. I was stunned. Did this mean his father had done this before? Unable to hold back, I finally asked, Jamil, has your father been married before too? Jamil gave me a sharp, irritated look and said, You'll find out soon enough just how colorful Abba's personality is. I just don't understand why he's always bent on ruining my reputation. The whole neighborhood mocks us, that an old man like him still can't give up his flirtatious ways. But how do I explain anything to him? He stomped off to the room in anger, and I stood there in shock. I had never sensed that my father-in-law was like this. But today, after seeing his young bride and his demeanor, something definitely felt off. And now Jamil had openly confirmed the reason for his frustration. So that was why Jamil had kept me in a separate house after our wedding. Because even at this age, his father hadn't given up his indulgent lifestyle. I followed Jamil into the room. He had already laid down to sleep. My heart longed for him to spend some time with me, to talk like any newlywed couple would. I remembered how his father had held his bride's hand so respectfully, it made me wish Jamil would do the same with me. But he had never made time for me. He didn't enjoy speaking to me, and even when he came close, it felt like a duty, nothing more. After a moment, he would simply turn away and fall asleep. I sat beside him, but he spoke harshly without even looking at me. Let me sleep. My head's already messed up because of Abba. Don't make me say something awful to you too. With that, he closed his eyes, and my heart shattered. All his father had done was get married. Was that really worth creating such a storm over? Besides, his father lived in a separate house now. I turned to the other side and closed my eyes, wondering, why did Jamil's father feel the need to marry at this age? He was 55, it's not a young age, and he had high blood pressure too. Who would even give their daughter to such a man? Perhaps the reason was money. He owned several rental properties and had a steady income. Maybe that's how he managed to find a girl so easily. Lost in these thoughts, I eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I was woken by Aunt Zara, our neighbor, standing at the door. I had no choice but to let her in. She sat down and immediately started, So, your father's-in-law married again. He brought his bride home last night. The whole neighborhood saw it. I just don't understand. Even after bringing a daughter-in-law home for his son, his own antics still haven't stopped. She shook her head in disbelief and added, Who knows how many times your father-in-law has married now? Every few months he brings home a new young wife and then leaves her to go marry another. Aunt Zara let her tongue loose in front of me, saying all sorts of things about my father-in-law's character. I was shocked. I found myself covering my ears. I was starting to feel afraid of my own father-in-law. What kind of man was he that the entire neighborhood pointed fingers at his morality? Aunt Zara continued speaking for a while before finally leaving, but her words lingered in my mind. The rest of the day, I couldn't stop thinking about my father-in-law. That evening, the doorbell rang again. When I opened the door, it was my father-in-law standing there. I have to go take care of some important work and might be a bit late, he said. My wife is scared to be alone. If you don't mind, could I leave her here with you for a while? How could I say no? I hesitantly replied, All right, Abba, you can leave her here. He went back and soon returned with his wife, whose name I still didn't know. Before leaving, he told me he'd be back around 11 or 12 at night. I didn't mind at all. My own husband never set foot inside the house before 1 a.m. anyway. So I peacefully sat with my new mother-in-law. I thought this was the perfect chance to hear her story, to ask her how my elderly father-in-law had ended up marrying her. She was sitting right in front of me on the sofa. I handed her a cup of tea and gently asked, What's your name? And how did Abba end up marrying you? She replied in a calm, collected tone, My name is Najia. A little while ago, I met your Abba, and he married me. Her composed response didn't answer much, but the happiness and glow on her face said it all. My father-in-law was treating her very well. I don't know why, but I started to feel jealous. That sparkle in her eyes, that contentment, I had never seen it in my own reflection. How could it be there? My husband didn't care for me, didn't value me, didn't give me attention, love, or even a warm moment at night. Ours was a nameless bond that he was only enduring out of obligation. But this girl, who was the same age as me, looked truly happy with my aging father-in-law. I was shocked. She quietly continued watching TV while I went about my chores. Then my father-in-law came back and took Najia with him. After they left, I found myself feeling even more bitter. What crime had I committed that my own husband didn't even see my worth? Around 1 a.m., Jamil returned home as usual. Angry, he asked, "Was Abba here again today?" I replied, "Yes. He left Najia with me for a while." Jamil flared up, "From now on, don't ever let Abba or any of his women into this house again." "I don't want people to talk about you the same way they talk about my father," Jamil said, angrily instructing me as he went into the room, and I fell silent. For the first time in my life, I saw a son who hated his father so much. Regardless, Jamil's words were very important to me, so I cut off all contact with my father-in-law, and he never came to my door again. Later, I found out from Aunt Zara that Najia was no longer living with my father-in-law. He had left her. I was shocked. Such a young and beautiful girl, how could he have left her? But no one had the answer to that, not even Aunt Zara. Days continued to pass silently. The distance between me and Jamil still remained. Sometimes I felt those distances were due to the burden he carried. He always seemed disturbed, and I never got the feeling that there was another woman in his life. What I did feel was that he was mentally not at ease, as if troubled by something deeply rooted. About a month and a half passed, and then one evening, Aunt Zara came stumbling into my house and said, "Do you know your father-in-law got married again? This time to a 15-year-old girl." This time, I jumped in shock. "Aunt Zara, what are you saying? A 15-year-old is just a child. My father-in-law is nearly 55. At my words, Aunt Zara laughed sarcastically and said, "That's the thing. Where does this old man find such young and beautiful girls? And who gives him their daughters? I think he just uses poor girls for his pleasures." Saying this, she put her hands to her ears in disgust and left, muttering, "God forgive us." And I was left pondering, what is really going on? That night, when Jamil returned home, I told him what Aunt Zara had said. He sat silently for a while and then said, "I can't say anything to Abba. He is my father after all, but because of him, I am deeply disturbed. If I speak to him, it leads to a fight. If I stay silent, the world blames me too." He looked incredibly stressed, so I gently placed my hand on his shoulder and tried to comfort him, to bring him closer with love. But the very next moment, he pushed my hand away and said angrily, "Don't try to act like one of those street women with me. I don't like it at all when you come close like that." Saying this, he walked into the washroom, and I was left sitting there, stunned. I was his wife. I loved him. I had every right to be close to him. And yet, he had called me a street woman, piercing my heart completely. I called my mother and unwillingly complained about my husband. After listening to me, she said, "Dear, he's a good boy. He earns and takes care of you. Just do what he says. Not every man is the same. Maybe he is troubled because of his father's actions." I remained silent after hearing her words. I knew my mother would always advise me to quietly adjust with my husband, so I didn't complain much. Time passed, and then I learned that my father-in-law had remarried and had left his previous wife. I was shocked to find out how, at his age, he could manage such young girls while my husband couldn't even give me proper time. I was furious, and then, coincidentally, my father-in-law came to the door. He said, "My wife isn't feeling well. Can you come over for a while to help?" Looking at him from head to toe, my heart started racing and all sorts of questions arose in my mind. I decided this was the moment to directly ask him. I said, "Okay, I'll come with you, but first I need to ask you something. Will you tell me why you keep remarrying? Because of you, Jamil is so disturbed that he doesn't even give me time." He spends all his time listening to gossip because of you, and he takes his anger out on me. Our married life has been ruined because of your marriages. So far, my husband hasn't even spent proper time with me. He just wants to escape this house and this neighborhood, and even now he's with his friends. Why, at your age, do you still have the desire to get married? I spoke rudely, and he looked me up and down, then said, "Let's go inside and talk. We'll talk inside." He entered the house, and I sat in front of him. He said, "Daughter-in-law, what I'm about to tell you, I don't know if you'll believe it, but everything I say will be true." After a pause, he began speaking slowly. "Before my marriage, I was like Jamil, carefree, hanging out with friends, and going to places I shouldn't have gone. It was my hobby. And that's when I liked Jamil's mother. She was a woman who used to dance in a brothel, and I fell in love with her. Then, despite the whole world's opposition, I married her, brought her here, gave her a respectable life, and began living with her. But after Jamil was born, my wife was diagnosed with cancer and passed away. I then took on the responsibility of raising Jamil. I love my wife so much that I never even thought about remarrying until Jamil turned 15. One day I was reminded of my wife, so I wandered around the streets where she used to be famous, known by the name of Jugnu. When I went there, I realized how many innocent girls were still being brought to those streets, their dignity being violated, forced to dance. That day, I felt as though something had taken my peace away. It seemed like many girls like Khalida were now being born in this world. That night, I saw my mother in a dream. She told me, "Can you save the dignity of other girls from being auctioned off like mine?" Hearing her, I was stunned. I didn't understand what was happening. The next day, I went back to the same brothel where Khalida used to live. There, I saw a young girl who was being forced to dance. I had enough money, so I paid the asking price and married her on the spot, bringing her with me. But I wasn't worthy of being her husband because I still loved Khalida. I had a young son, and I only married this girl to free her from the brothel. After a few days of keeping her with me, I divorced her, took her back to her parents, explained everything, and handed her over to them. That day, I felt a deep sense of peace. After that, I began the same routine. Every 15 days or so, I would visit the brothel, buy any girl who was being forced to dance, marry her, and after a few days, I would find her parents and return her to them. But Jamil never liked this. He always said that people talked badly about us. He was influenced by his friends who had told him that I was of a colorful nature and brought girls to fulfill my desires. I explained the truth to him many times, but he refused to understand. Because of him, I couldn't stop saving innocent girls' lives. I continued my work and married you to Jamil so that he could move forward in his life. But even today, he cares more about what the world says than anything else. That's why he's neither happy in his own life nor in his relationship with you. And he doesn't even let me live my life. He's always fighting with me. I don't understand, Bahu. What sin am I committing that everyone is causing so much pain? I've brought these girls from the brothels with respect, and I return them to their homes. But people only care about throwing mud at others. They don't know anyone's truth. My father-in-law finished speaking and fell silent, and I just kept looking at him. I had never thought that he was doing such a noble thing. I told my father-in-law not to worry. I will talk to Jamil and explain things to him. And from now on, I'll help him with this noble cause. I'll also help you in returning these girls to their homes. Hearing this, my father-in-law was very happy and said, "If you come with me and help me return these girls to their homes, it'll be much easier for me because when I take them to their parents, I have to answer thousands of questions, which is very difficult for me." I promised my father-in-law that I would stand by him no matter what, and I started doing so. Whenever my father-in-law brought a girl after marrying her, I would take care of her and then help him return her to her parents. Slowly, I began to explain to Jamil that his father was not doing anything wrong. Little by little, Jamil began to understand. As his mental stress decreased, my relationship with him also improved. Today, we are living a good life.